Hello, and welcome to the second event in the Booksellers Comms in the Time of Corona series, curated in the association with the BMS and the PPC. My name is Miriam Robinson, and I'm the Program Director of the Booksellers Marketing and Publicity Conference, which takes place every year in the summer and will take place virtually the week of July 6th this year. This series and the conference itself are sponsored by BookBub, FMCM, and Nielsen, and we are, as always, incredibly grateful for their support. Some quick housekeeping things before I introduce our panel. This event will last until 5 p.m., which includes 10 minutes at the end for questions. The questions will be moderated by a member of the Bookseller team, so please submit your questions, indicating which panelist the question is for, at any point during this conversation via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Once it's time for questions, we will of course try to get through as many as we possibly can in the time allotted. You can also use the chat function to say hello to your colleagues on here if you like. If you have questions or comments for everyone, make sure to choose all panelists and attendees from the drop-down box so your comment or question can be seen. I will not be keeping my chat on, so if you need to communicate with the Bookseller team about something you're experiencing at your end, then please use the chat to send a message to Emma Lowe. If for any reason we lose connection, please stay where you are and you'll be emailed a fresh link to log back in. So here we are to discuss the world of virtual events, which has proven to be a popular choice as over 600 of you have signed up for today. Whether you're curating your own events, constructing tours for your authors, or incorporating events into the marketing mix, the new world of live online is currently posing a lot more questions than answers. But as we've seen over the last couple of months, publishing is reacting with incredible creativity and agility. So we're going to use today to examine what's working thus far and think a bit about where we might be headed. Following that, if the past 2 months is anything to go by, then the next 2 months will be radically different from where we are now, so we'll certainly be revisiting this topic at the July conference. Our chat today is going to touch on a number of areas based on who we have in attendance, and more of these roles are shifting all the time, so if one aspect of events wasn't in your remit before, it's quite possible that it is now. We'll divide our time roughly into discussing event organization, monetization, and event publicity and promotion. Monetization has been a big one for a lot of the people who emailed me last week. Everyone is feeling their way through this, and there's really no clear answers yet, but we'll look at some examples and talk about what's being tried thus far. I am so pleased to be able to discuss these issues today with 4 incredibly talented women. With us today, we have CJ Cooke, author and founder of the Stay-at-Home Literature Festival, Sue Porter, owner of Linghams Books and co-founder of At Home with 4 Indies, Maura Wilding, communications director at Orion, and Caroline Maddison, head of audience development at Penguin Random House. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read out full bios right now, but you can find them all on the Booksellers Marketing and Publicity Conference website. So let's begin. And let's talk about what makes a successful virtual event, whether it mirrors what you need in real life events or whether there are elements of the real world that simply don't translate online. CJ, let's start with you. Your Stay-at-Home Literature Festival was one of the first virtual festivals out of the gate this year. Can you say something about your organizing principle when pulling it together, and if anything surprised you about what did and didn't work?
Oh, yes. Well, thank you. Well, I have to say my organizing principle was trying to get it as fast as possible. So I did it within 2 weeks. If I had more time, I probably would have been a lot more organized and, had more time to think about things. But as it happened, I used a Google Doc to cascade to authors who signed up that way. And I did think about the key thing that would make it a festival was in terms of tapping into current ideas and current topics. So the pandemic was one of them, but I didn't want to make it all about what was going on. So I wanted to include events about climate change and about politics and about motherhood, and I wanted some fun activities too, because ultimately this was a festival designed to promote connectivity and anti-isolation. So we had events such as authors and their pets, things that you wouldn't maybe be able to do at I don't think you could necessarily do it at a normal festival. So yeah, I wanted to capitalize upon this digital event. So yeah, that was my sort of organizing principle.
Thank you. Let's move on to Sue. You and 3 other booksellers at Forum Books, Book a Bookshop, and Bookish launched At Home with 4 Indies as a way of continuing to hold author events for your customers while your shops were closed. So which events are you seeing doing particularly well right now? And what would you advise organizers when curating their programs?
Obviously the big names, we get the good audiences for the bigger names, but it's also if they have a big social media following that they retweet and share across all social media. That's a huge thing. One of the things that we do with the 4 Indies is we ask the author to do a 10-second video to say who they are, the date of the event, and that it's brought to you by the 4 independent bookshops. And that is getting nearly as many viewings as the actual event as well. So customers really, really like that. So you can get the more participation from the author, the better. That's what we're finding. And again, it doesn't have to be a big name for the participation. The smaller names as well, debuts out there. But it's the more they get involved, the better, really. And the big thing for us is if we can get hold of signed copies. Because they fly out the door, and that is a huge thing for us, for all the bookshops really, all independents, that we need signed copies.
I think that's something that I know the Booksellers Association has really echoed, that whether or not bookshops are holding events, anything that publishers can do in terms of providing a USP for bookshops, whether it's signed copies or author videos or things like that, are just top of the list, right? Thank you. So Caroline, from a different perspective, so in the physical world, as it were, we've seen a change over the last decade in how we define literary event, right? We moved from the straight author interview into things like literary deathmatch and salons and pub nights. And similarly, we're already seeing that an event online doesn't have to just mean 2 authors chatting with each other. Can you talk about what you consider to be an event at the moment and how that informs your strategy?
Yeah, so here at Penguin Children's, as an initial response to the lockdown, we turned around a regular Puffin Storytime moment on the channel. So that's making sure that we have read-alongs and draw-alongs every weekday at 3:30 as a moment for people to gather and to enjoy those stories. And those regular kind of social initiatives on platforms that really engage readers are also, in a sense, those kind of micro events that really build awareness at the top of that marketing funnel and will really feed into your main event as well. And it doesn't have to be slick and branded. You don't have to spend lots of money. We put in a lot of activity at Penguin Children's in order to kind of tighten up our kind of events online. So for example, in Children's we have now regular quizzes on Fridays for Puffin Books. We have a daily Ladybird challenge to help families with activity ideas. We are asking our communities, making sure that we're talking to them every single week, trying to delight them in the current situation. So even just being questions like, what is your ultimate childhood book to be in lockdown with, or what would Joe March's quarantine routine be? So try to be a delightful kind of moment where you talk and engage people. And also just being mindful that people will come to you because there's opportunities to engage, they want different kinds of content, and that all helps in terms of building your community and feeding those larger events.
Brilliant, thank you. Maura, how about you from a publicity perspective? What types of authors and what types of content are doing particularly well right now?
I think there's a huge amount of mirroring the real world at play here. Our biggest successes have been with authors and with events that would also have drawn a big crowd and converted well in the real world. So it's just been incredible to see, for example, with IG Live, Waterstones have done an amazing job of curating that content, promoting it, because it must have been incredibly overwhelming for them to have so many offers from, I imagine, every publicist in town. So it's just what has been so fascinating is seeing everyone's skill at curating content and being clear about who your audience is and how you're going to reach them. And I think that is where you see the successes. Savage Reads as well on IG Live has been incredible. And I think also what is definitely coming like to the front is how we're using community. And if you look at, for example, with Sue and At Home with 4 Indies, it's about going to the place where your audience already is. So Facebook Live is also very dynamic and very engaging.
Brilliant. Well, we'll come on and we'll have a little more in-depth look at platforms a little bit down the line. So even without chairs to put out and drinks to serve, virtual events are still a lot of work. And as we'll discuss later, they currently hold little guarantee of sales. So I feel that all events work best when there's a strong reason to hold them. And as Maura, you just mentioned, an audience need that you're trying to meet. So I want us to look at different reasons for running events right now, because I think there's a possibility for overwhelm if everyone thinks they should be putting all of their authors forward for all of the things all of the time. So Sue, can you say something about what your reasons are for running events?
So when we went into lockdown, obviously that first week we were hit with, we had to close the shop, and then we couldn't get hold of any books when the wholesalers closed down, which obviously Gardeners is open now, which is brilliant. But I came up with the idea and pitched it to my 3 colleagues who were all best friends in the industry, and they literally bit my hand off. They were like, this is brilliant, we've got to do this. And the whole thing was, at that stage, because we couldn't get the books, was all about our communities. So we've all got a huge following on social media, and when you add it all up, I've got some stats I can cover a bit later, but I think it's about 30,000 people reach across, and that's just us 4 without incorporating any other independents. So that was a big thing for us. We had to put on the show, really, to keep our name out there for our customers, and also for the publicists to say, look guys, we're still here, we can still offer some sort of service, so you don't forget about us. And it grew arms and legs, and now I think we're booked up to the end of July now. So that's why we did it, and that's where we're coming from. It is definitely community based for us.
Brilliant, thank you. Maura, how about you? When sales aren't a given at the moment, what are you weighing up when choosing whether your author should be doing events?
Hugely speaks to Sue's point about connection. So much of what we all do is about connections and how stories connect people. And people are still buying books, so we need to look at ways that we're engaging with readers as we would pre-lockdown. It's harder, it's riskier, it feels scarier, but a big part of it is always about focusing for us on the long game. You know, there will be a time where this isn't how we live. And so it's about what we do now and how that has an impact in the long run. So how we are raising awareness of our authors, building their brand, building a sense of community, not just within Orion, but also Hachette. And also using all of these experience to keep on understanding our consumers in as many ways as we can as possible. So it's not always about, in terms of the sales are hard to measure and they are hard to drive, but it's about keeping your eye on the long term at this point.
Yeah.
Okay, Caroline, I think you have some similar thoughts. And also just this morning, Puffin announced the Puffin Festival of Big Dreams, which is going to run in June. So following on, can you say something about what this will look like and what the brand considerations were when you were launching this?
Absolutely. So the Puffin Festival of Big Dreams, in partnership with Waterstone, so it's a 7-day festival on Puffin's YouTube and Facebook channels. So we'll be featuring authors, illustrators, special guests, and we'll be running masterclasses in draw-alongs, setting creating challenges for kids and families. And what we're doing is encouraging children to share their big dreams through stories, and we'll be illustrating those all week. So it is an online festival, but we'll also be offering offline challenges and activities, so really ensuring that we bring those points together. And the goal around that is definitely around what can we offer in the current situation and around Puffin as a brand. It's our 80th year, and it may not be the year that we might have planned. We'd hope to travel the length and breadth of the UK with our events. So whilst we can't travel, taking stories direct to children to help them really continue to dream big and be inspired by stories is just as important now as it ever was. And part of that is, and to kind of echo Maura's point, is around ensuring that we are really growing and building that community. So can we reach new audiences to bring them into Puffin, to stories, to reading? Can we deepen those relationships that we have with readers already, so that all that great community management where we ensure they have a really positive experience and come back? Because exactly what Maura says, those communities around our books, our brands, our authors have a long-term value and stretches beyond our current situation, and it's really crucial to keep sight of that. So there were some big considerations and what that event will do and help with audiences, as well as thinking long term.
Amazing, thank you so much. CJ, you've talked about why you launched the festival this year. You're considering doing it again. And what would your reasons and your goals be for doing another one as you think about that?
Well, I think I was very aware of people for whom this situation, is ongoing. They have ongoing barriers to accessing literary culture and accessing literary events. And the sort of four core areas that we found throughout the festival, and particularly that were picked up in a survey that we ran and some plenary sessions, were disability, caring responsibilities, remote living, and also class issues, including cost. But there was also an element of not feeling that they belong to literary communities. And so a digital event enables people with caring responsibilities to participate. We had several motherhood events and people were able to bring their children along to them, because you can, of course, mute yourself. You can turn your camera off if you want to. So that was really, really interesting to see. But also we had feedback from people who said that, ordinarily disability prevents them from participating in literary culture, whereas digital events enable them to participate, and they were absolutely over the moon with that. But I do think there's a wider issue around some class barriers, and I'm interested in looking at that, and maybe we'll pick that up in the monetization discussion. But that's fundamentally why I want to continue this, because although this came at a moment of lockdown and a very surreal global moment, I think there are ongoing issues that many people face, and even in terms of remote living, trying to get to a festival can be very, very costly. Not just the cost of attending the events, but getting a hotel and the travel and what have you. It might just not be possible for people. So there are ways to do this, I think, that are smart, that are innovative, and I think there are actual ways that can be very, very creative. Things that you might not be able to do in a live literary event that you can do digitally, which are very interesting to look at. So I think I'm motivated by a sense of continuing this community, enabling accessibility, but also being quite creative in the tools that we have now to do these things at a distance.
That's fascinating, CJ. Thank you so much. I think you're absolutely right. This question of accessibility is one that's gonna carry on and be fascinating to watch as the big festivals come online and incorporate it into their strategies. Let's talk very briefly about platforms. People are starting to get a bit more comfortable with the various options, whether it's Zoom, MyVLF, Crowdcast, and of course, Facebook and Instagram Live. But it's still early days and there are a lot of choices to make. Sue, you use Facebook Live for your events, but have obviously investigated others. Why have you gone with Facebook Live, and what is the most important thing for you in considering?
I think one of the things that we love about Facebook Live is that obviously you're watching the event in the moment, but also there's a huge, and I mean a huge amount of customers that come back and watch it at a later date. If I can just give you some statistics. We did Ollie Ollerton about 2 weeks ago. I think we had about 700 people watching it at the time, and now it's been viewed by 14,000 people. Marianne Keyes, that's hit 19,000. Elizabeth McNeil, debut author last year, who most of us have done an event with, she did an event with us last week, and she's hit 3.2 thousand. So the figures, are speaking for themselves. And again, we're getting sales, not on the night. We're getting some on the night, but then afterwards, people are coming back to say, oh, just watched it. And they're interacting with the comments from the author on Facebook Live, which is why I really have enjoyed hosting it on Facebook Live. However, going forward, the big question for the autumn, with the big names, the big events, the big books that are coming out for Christmas, we're exploring other avenues, and one of them is Zoom, because obviously it's a closed group, and potentially we could look to do book and ticket, and that's what we're looking at the moment. I'm talking to a bookshop in America who's doing it at the moment, and just asking the pros and cons, because obviously it's a closed group, you can't watch it again, so you're kind of losing that side of the audience. So yeah, Facebook Live at the moment, which does seem to be working very well for us, and we're certainly getting the figures watching it, so I'm really pleased with that.
Brilliant. And yes, we'll come to a little more detail on that monetization bit later, but that's really fascinating. CJ, you have been running your events on Zoom, if I'm correct, and as a professor, you've also taught your classes on Zoom as well. What works about it for you?
So I've tried a range. I've been teaching distant learning for 5 years, and we teach live, so it's very important that we have a platform that is stable. So Skype and Google Hangout aren't great for that, but we've tried BlueJeans, we've tried WebEx, and then we tried Zoom, and I found Zoom to be the most stable platform and the most user-friendly. And that was one of the reasons why, when I put together the Stay at Home Festival, I thought of Zoom, because it used to be you could just send the link to people and they didn't have to download anything, whereas now they've changed it. You do have to download Zoom. But I find Zoom, actually, inadvertently, we find that the kind of community that is set up by Zoom is preferable to people, because with Facebook Live, what I think is probably worth looking into is how many people come in for maybe a couple of seconds and then log out again. And same with Instagram Live, how many people stay on? Whereas with Zoom, we found that people were staying on for longer. And I think that just the way we have now this grid, with our events, we would have, the full grid of people, so everyone could see each other's faces as long as cameras were on. And even if not, you could still see that there was a crowd there. And it was that sense of being part of something that sort of mirrors or mimics the actual audience event. And similarly, the chat box feature, as you can see, if you click on the chat at the side, the audience were having a conversation often with each other, just as they are right now, while the events were going on. So it was a real sense of conversation, which is exactly what literature is. It's a conversation between authors, and that level of interactivity, I think, was key. In terms of platform, I would use Zoom again. I would use it more carefully now that I'm very well conversed with Zoom bombing, but I do think that sense of being able to have a grid of people. The other thing with Zoom is you can actually stream it to Facebook and to YouTube, and YouTube also have a chat box facility. But as long as there is that ability for people to interact, I think that's key. Otherwise, it feels a bit like just watching a YouTube video. You could watch it anytime.
Okay, thank you. And how about Maura? Are you finding that different platforms work best for different audiences, or indeed for different authors?
For me, it goes back to the audience again. And actually, one thing that was slightly different now is about actually the host as well. So when we first started exploring online events, I was really mindful of, particularly with certain retailers, that by leaning on them even to drive sales at a really difficult and crucial time, it's about making sure that they feel like they can supply the books and that they can support it. So we were really mindful of making sure that it was an event that actually benefited the host as well. And then in terms of platform for us, in terms of launching a book, it's a big part of it is about having different events across different platforms in order to catch as many people's attention as possible. So where, for example, you can see people arriving and leaving on IG Live and Facebook for sure, but it's all of the build up to that moment that also has a huge impact in terms of awareness and getting your book jacket in front of people's eyeballs. So it's not just the event itself, it's the kind of build up to it, and then of course afterwards with sharing what is incredibly rich content. But obviously as the event organizer, that's not as important, but in terms of like for a publisher, in terms of building a sense of an event and building a sense of momentum, it's as many channels as possible, really.
Thank you. Caroline, with either the Puffin Festival or what you're doing across the brand, can you tell us the different platforms you're using to bring in an audience, the different platforms you're using, and also to bring in an audience question, what is working best for families?
So for families, so both for Puffin Storytime and for the festival, we are using, we're focusing on YouTube and Facebook, with the other channels supporting and building that momentum. And we've done that because it's familiar platforms for that family audience. YouTube especially, because they treat it as you would a TV channel. So it makes it really easy experience for them. And at the moment, people need really quick, frictionless experiences, especially for families. So we're also being mindful of of safety in terms of data, GDPR, and just being really conscious of how that audience will be able to view and interact with a family.
Brilliant, thank you. So just to say for the group, if you're only just joining us, do submit your questions for our panelists via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We're getting lots in already, and we'll be answering as many as possible at the end. Maura and Caroline, I want to touch a little bit more on metrics. We've heard some really interesting stuff there from Sue and CJ as well. An obvious metric that everyone is obsessed with at the moment is attendees, as we've heard, how many eyeballs we have on any given event at any given time. So yes, Maura, to start, is the goal to have as many people watching these events as humanly possible?
It changes from event to event, which is a really annoying answer, but I think it's about what you're aiming to do. So is it about raising awareness? Is it about having a really authentic and individual experience through connection? So through a smaller event? Is it about growing community or driving sales? So first-hand experience for me was the Rat Line by Philippe Sands, which we launched at the end of April. We did a series of events across Publication Week in order to build kind of like a virtual book tour, and we definitely saw an increase on attendance above what we would have had in the physical world, which is obvious, of course, but given that we were competing with a whole load of free content and especially in April, where I think there was a real push with lots of arts organisations stepping into that virtual space. So it was, yeah, it's just been incredible to see our ability to reach a much bigger audience. And just to speak to very quickly CJ's comment about accessibility, that for me has been the most enriching and exciting possibility for my work in publishing, is this idea that we can reach readers, which of course has existed for a long time, but it's moments like this where the physical gets taken away and you suddenly very richly feel the experience that you can now give other people that have previously not been able to attend. So that is definitely something that we saw in April and we're seeing now.
Thank you. On the other side, Caroline, can you talk a little bit about what the benefits might be or are of smaller events and what you can do with a smaller event that you can't do with a larger one?
Yeah, so smaller events are just as valuable. If you have like an engaged smaller audience where they've had a really positive experience, can they share that online? What else can you give back to those attendees that will mean that they will go tell their friends? Those people are great advocates for you and your brand and your book and your author and part of your community now. So although they may be smaller in numbers, they're a good moment in order, they're a good community in order to help market on your event and your ideas that's coming up. And I would say it's really crucial to track and measure everything. So how did they interact with that event? What was the view through rate? What was the reach and the click through? How did they comment and interact? And that will really stand you in good stead in order to build on that. And so I think there's a really huge value in having a smaller event. And some companies I've seen outside of publishing, they've capped attendance to make smaller events, using that psychology almost to think as a traditional kind of buyer of event. We know that there's limited places. I'll buy a ticket, I'll make time for it. So there's quite an interesting mix that's happening across event sizes, but they're just as valuable as they'll help kind of spread the word next time.
Brilliant, thank you. When we are trying to get those audience numbers, large or small, I want to talk about how we get there, about what can be done if we don't have a large following or a mailing list yourself or a big name author to promote the event on social. Sue, you touched on this a bit, but your focus seems to really be on social media, but also on collaboration, joining up with other independents to promote. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, obviously the four of us work together and we have got that big reach on social media, but we also, we're talking to other independents, and what's quite nice is when we're streaming the events, we see other independent bookshops streaming it to their shops as well. Also working with independent publishers who are putting forward debut authors, which works quite nice as well. I think the main thing is that the more that we get from an author and the publicist, the better, and it works for us.
Brilliant. How about CJ? You started from scratch for Stay at Home Literature Festival without a pre-existing mailing list. Where was your audience coming from?
Primarily Twitter. I mentioned to you that I just tweeted frantically and very energetically. I think that you've got to know how to use social media. And I just made sure that I kept a lot of energy around it. I used lots of GIFs, and people just followed that and responded to that. I kept a track or tabs on the sort of impressions that certain tweets would have, and that sort of give me a guideline as to, you know, what people were responding to. But yeah, to not have a pre-existing mailing list was a bit of an issue, but I did find that we got a huge following, and maybe it was because we were just of the moment, but certainly I think you got to make sure that you're using social media appropriately.
Okay, great. I'm going to leapfrog forward a little bit here, and we're going to start talking about money. We are in a different place even to where we were a month ago. As we've mentioned, we're still very much wanting to offer content for free, for goodwill, but also everybody is becoming increasingly conscious of a very real need to meet sales targets, often for some just in order to stay afloat. So let's talk about book sales. Sue, you touched on this a little bit. Did you have anything to add in terms of how much you've looked into Book and Ticket, and what else you're thinking about there?
The thing is, with the Book and Ticket, I think it has to be a closed group, which I don't think we can do that on Facebook Live, which is why I'd move over to Zoom. And that way you can have 500 people, you can have 20 people. And that way, if we can have an author for more than one day, and if we had a couple of days, obviously we would do if it was a big name, we could do the closed group, and you could do Book and Ticket, 500 people. And then you get the big sales, and that's just allowing if the author can give us that time, the publicist can give us that time, and also the big thing for us is obviously getting the signed books or book plates if you can't get the signed books, and that is a huge seller for us. So if we're advertising it to say you're not going to meet the person, but you're going to get a signed book, and it's Book and Ticket, but you'd have 4 people in your household at home watching it, and I just think that that's definitely the way forward for us, and certainly on that platform, because I can't really see it working on any other platform at the moment.
And I'm just looking at a question that's just come in from the audience, and you might not know the answer to this yet, but how do you technically execute Book and Ticket via Zoom? Have you looked into that yet?
So with that, you can do it on Eventbrite. That's the only platform I've seen that it works, and again, this is one that I've been advised from Bookshop in America that they're using, and then that way you capture all the information and your GDPR compliant as well.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, Maura, you and I discussed that it might be time for publishing to get a little more blatant about putting the buy links front and center on our virtual events. We need to stop being so coy and adorable. Have you seen this work, and are there platforms where this works better than others?
I don't think we're very coy, Miriam. I think it's more. I think it's more that some of the hosts were feeling kind of treading carefully about how they were pushing people to spend money at the beginning, but. What we have done is make sure that the link is available in all of the material that you're sending in advance. It's very, very clearly flagged during the event and then afterwards. And the big thing for us that we're exploring at the moment is incentives. So how will you persuade someone to pay for an event that they could potentially view for free elsewhere? And a big part of that is actually probably managing how your authors are spending their time. So you do need to be offering certain events as exclusives at the beginning of a campaign, and a lot of the things that we're looking into, things like, is there merchandise that we can be looking to produce that could be go alongside ticket cost? Of course, discounts off the price of a book, should we be lucky enough to be able to manage that. But also further down the line, does a ticket get you a chance to meet that author in person once it's a safe and healthy thing for us to do? So it's kind of how are you going to persuade someone to part with their money, and importantly, how do we all agree a really meaningful way of rewarding authors for their time, emotionally and physically? Events are really taxing, so it's also building in some money for authors as we would in the real world.
Well, that's, thank you. I think that moves us on really nicely to the next bit, which is for the events themselves, organizers can't afford to run events for free in the long term, both for their own bottom line and, as you say, if authors are ever going to be paid for appearances ever again. So we'll need to charge something eventually. During our inaugural panel, we wondered whether ultimately we would see the rise of a sort of Spotify type model for literary events with a combination of free and paid for content. In the more immediate, we're going to start seeing examples of organizations starting to monetize. I can share a simple slide here with a few examples, she says, with just a few different options on here. So How To Academy offered tiered ticketing, one tier of which includes the cost of the book. Intelligence Squared are offering digital events free to their paid subscribers. One publisher held a launch for £2, which went against the cost of a book, and festivals and conferences are discussing a sort of build your own model with different price points, allowing different numbers of events. So right now, as we say, everyone is just trying different things. So CJ, what have you explored in this space when you're thinking about stay at home for next year?
We've looked at all of these different models. The donation-based model. I noticed the Court International Literary Festival, I think they got 10,000, I think they said 10,000 euros in donations. But I think that there's value in looking at sponsorship models as well. So not just making the audience pay, but getting organizations to pay as well. Because I do think authors should be paid, especially when it's not part of a professional activity. And certainly when we had some workshops, you know, there's a lot of work involved in that. But yeah, I think it's about being very smart in how you expect your audience to pay. And because that poses a barrier to certain, you know, audiences, you want to make sure they can access. Patreon is also a good model to look at as well. I'm very interested in the Patreon model, whereby they have some free content, but then they have, as you say, some paid for content. So that's something I'm considering also.
Thank you. Those are some really great examples. How about you, Caroline? What models have you seen that are worth considering for monetizing?
I think it's useful to look at what's happening on the platform. So Facebook announced they'll be holding a new area where it's called Messenger Rooms, and that's for up to 50 and above people. So they are taking on Zoom, and they'll also be rolling out a monetization mechanism. So we'll see that's gone out in the US and will come to the UK. So I think it's been about being mindful that some of those platforms that we may be using actually are rolling out kind of updates to help in the current situation. So it's a good one to keep an eye on, because if those platforms people are really used to and familiar and comfortable with, it could open up new opportunities.
Great, thank you. Maura, how about you? Have you seen anything that has struck you as worth investigating for monetizing events?
Yeah, purely for ways to really drive autumn book sales, but also to support the people that we're, you know, really relying on to host them. So retailers, arts organizations, it's looking at ways that people can be, their time can be rewarded. Well, I think How To Academy, as you've shared on that slide, have been doing pay what you can, and then are moving to tiering, which I think is a really brilliant idea. And I also think that what that allows for is to keep that access open for people that, especially as we're, you know, who knows what we're entering into in terms of the financial situation. So it's making sure that there are as few boundaries as possible, whilst us all being able to drive sales in a way that feels kind of authentic and without without pushing it too hard. As a publicist, I probably shouldn't say that.
Well, we'll move you swiftly on to another realm of publicity. Then, at that point, I think we'll probably end up with some more questions about money in the Q&A section. But let's move on to pitching for events. We touched this briefly in the last panel, but I want to get quite practical in terms of what's getting the attention of events organizers right now. So, Maura, if I can come straight back to you. If a publisher doesn't have a big name author or the weight of a large house behind them, how can they get noticed, and what's the best way to craft a pitch for virtual events right now?
Again, mirroring the real world, think about what you are offering that the audience will want from you. So for example, collaborate and join up with another author, or tap into something that is very now and very of the zeitgeist, things that people want to hear about or talk about. And I think that's probably, you need to start from your audience's needs or audience desires first, and then work out how your author or how your book fits into that. And I think partnering for us, certainly the most rewarding part has been partnering with organisations. So we had a fantastic event with the London Library. Claire Berliner was amazing to work with, but we also brought another party on board, which was Jewish Book Week. So that's, if you think about it, that's the author, London Library and Jewish Book Week's mailing lists that you're pulling in together. So I guess when you are pitching, you really need to be pitching about keeping in mind how you're going to bring audiences to that event. It's not just the host's responsibility, where maybe before it might have been. I think now we have a kind of a joint responsibility to really fill that virtual room.
I think you're right. I think the onus really did used to rest on the host, and it's a different space now. So that's really, really, really useful. Sue, as an event organizer, what is getting your attention right now from publicist pitching?
I think as much advertising as we can get and support from the publicist, and if the author engages, which I touched on earlier, that's a huge thing. So if they're retweeting or doing their own social media and mentioning the event, and again, it's the ability to get those signed books, because you can almost guarantee that whereas you might just sell one or two unsigned books, you can sell your big piles of signed books, and so it's getting the author to agree to do that. And obviously it's a little bit difficult at the moment in the situation that we're in, but that would be a big shout out from all of us, really. And also it's kind of how the pitch comes in. I worked with an independent, as I say, a publisher last week, and their pitch was it was great fun, and it was a young boy who was 16, and his engagement for a 16-year-old was phenomenal, and it was just a pleasure to deal with him. It was an absolute pleasure. So I think the key thing is social media and getting the author and the publisher to back you with all the advertising and as much social media as possible.
I think one thing that you pointed out as well, Sue, when we were talking, was that publisher really supported you guys in your sort of early stages of launching.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
And I think that's a thing that's, again, really mirroring the real world, which is that it's when we foster these relationships, that's what then kind of gets your attention later on.
Yeah,
exactly. It's difficult because it feels like starting over in some way, but we're in a whole new space to grow new relationships right now. Okay, brilliant. So this one again for Maura, I just want to talk briefly about author tours. When you are planning a virtual author tour, how are you prioritizing where your authors are appearing, and also how do you prioritize which authors do events at all right now?
Again, mirroring the real world, we look at it as a whole. So we're looking at what relationships do we already have that we really want to support and foster and support, and then also who out there from other parties do we know that will have an audience that will want this book or want to hear from this author. And so what we have done so far with a number of our books is about tracking them over the first few weeks of publication, and tapping into not just retailer hosted events, but also arts organisations, and even tying in with other authors who have a really strong base on social media. So it's about really trying to get in as many places as possible, which again is exactly what we try and do in the real world. We've also looked at tapping into brands, because authors and books are really content rich, and those brands at the moment, certainly retail brands, are really looking for interesting and engaging content to keep speaking to their consumers with. So for Exciting Times, which was a debut that we published at the end of April, we partnered with Rixo, a fashion brand, and Refinery 29 for a partnership for a book club, well, really a kind of a traditional book talk. But that's about making sure that we're in areas of the market which perhaps a book consumer we wouldn't normally reach. So again, that is similar to the real world. We would always be looking at reaching readers in every possible way. But I do think it's important that you're offering these event hosts who are investing a huge amount of time, you're offering them something different every time. So whether that's with another author or using a different, because it doesn't always have to be online events, it could be online content that you're driving people towards. So it's just about differentiating so that the consumer's getting something different.
Thank you. That's great. Let's, in the same space, let's talk about author care, and let's go to CJ first from an author perspective. What do you, and if you can speak for your fellow authors, feel like you need from your publicists when it comes to online events? And just also to loop in a question from the audience here, do you think authors will eventually expect to be paid for virtual events, which is something we touched on a bit above, but.
In terms of what authors should expect, I think it's the same kind of thing that audiences require on a really granular level, that real clear detail. And I haven't found that to be a problem, to be honest. I think there has been a great communication, but I think that's fundamental. I also made sure to host I had 3 slots, Zoom tryouts, because some people had never used Zoom before. And so you don't want that kind of nervousness around technology, upsetting the event or upsetting the author. So I think just enabling them to try it out beforehand and grow comfortable with the platform and decide where they want to be in their home or office or whatever when they're doing the event. The second question was regarding monetization, about payment.
Just again, payment.
I mean, I think authors should be paid. I think maybe it's different, maybe if it's a promotional activity, but yeah, I think that if authors are doing workshops, we got a tremendous amount of people attending workshops, and it can be on anything, however small in terms of writing. People love to hear about that process. So I think whenever there's that kind of interactivity, Zoom is draining. I find it a lot more work than doing a live teaching class in terms of online teaching, and even doing sort of speaking events. So it's not that it's easier, it's actually harder. So yeah, I think it should be a consideration.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to one more question before we open up to the group for questions. For Caroline and for Sue, as we've talked about, events have always been about community building, whether in the real or the virtual space, but that takes on a whole new meaning in the virtual world, where on one hand, data is more easily obtainable, but you absolutely lose the power of in-person interaction. So Caroline, can you talk about how you use events as part of the content funnel to create and maintain your reader community?
Yeah, so if we think of the community as a marketing funnel, that we know that those events can play a really important role at each stage of that funnel. So at the top, where you're growing awareness and audiences, events are great ways in for new audiences. And in your marketing mix, being savvy about your paid and organic activity across social media. So for paid, thinking about what data that you have access to. So can you build lookalike audiences or custom audiences of your newsletter list, your website visitors, the fans of those pages are already people who've interacted with your content, so that you can market and broaden that reach there. On your organic side, what content can you produce around the event, around the theme? Is that quotes? Is that shareable social currency? Is there content that you can create? I saw a great book event today that had a Spotify playlist attached to it. So thinking about that content that gets people into the event before you've even started to sell that actual event, and that's really crucial. And thinking about how audiences, when they're coming to you new, when they land on your channels, what is the good user experiences? What does the content look like? Is it relevant? Because they'll quickly decide if their event and your brand is for them. And then that same event is really useful for your community that are already engaged. So thinking about that middle of the funnel. So that's when you get to nurture them around an event specifically. So that's thinking about, can you let them know first? Will they get a discount when they sign up? Do you ask them questions that will shape the event? Can they submit questions? Do they get something extra? So all those kind of points that's kind of touched on earlier. So what else, what is the value exchange that those people get for being part of the community and part of that event? And I think it's really useful to think about how you move that community through that funnel by using the event and just connecting those dots. So ensuring people who are new to your community, did they have a chance to sign up for a newsletter? Those people already part of the community, what are we doing to follow up, to celebrate them? Can they share UGC, word of mouth? So always thinking at those different points, how we engage and nurturing. And I think post-event, using your content that you've created is so crucial. So really sweat those assets and thinking about what can you then promote after the event. So if that's curated playlist, if that's quotes or content, there's a really good opportunity to then remarket that great content that you had. And then you can create warm audiences on social media through paid advertising, and then retarget them again, whatever your kind of goal is then, if that's a newsletter, website, or the next event. There's a really great way to use that content at every stage and really build that and engage that audience. Oh,
there's so much there. Thank you so much. I really want to make a brand of athletic wear. It's called Sweat Your Assets. Sorry. We're almost at the end. Sue, it's really hard to replicate the feel of a good bookshop event. But what can event organizers do to make sure that people who watch their events remain a part of their community?
I mean, I've just learned something then just listening to that, but obviously we've all got our own mailing lists which we use, and I think when the event is actually on, it's engaging with all the comments, which obviously is quite difficult because they're chatting a lot. But one of the big things is that you've got to stop them, and I'm sorry if this upsets anyone, but you've got to stop them going onto Amazon because it's an independent bookshop forum and we want to keep them on our forum and get them buying from us. So it's engaging with them all the way through. And then what we've started to do is to say, buy the books here, and then we'll capture their data and get them to like our page, so that every time we put an event on, it's obviously reaching a new audience. And with any advertising that we're doing, we're saying to them, again, you can submit a question for your favourite author. And that's working really, really well, because we're getting sort of about 20 questions to the publicist pre-event, so they've got something to work with. So it is hard though, I've got to say, it is hard capturing the new audience, and you've got to be working constantly on it.
I think you're right. Well, thank you. Okay, so I think what we're going to do is go to some audience question, and actually the first one I'm going to throw right back to Sue, which is, somebody has asked, what is the ideal time to schedule online events? I.e. during work hours or after work hours? And are there any other considerations around times to take note? And if any of the other panelists have some thoughts on this, just flail at me as we've discussed beforehand, and I'll call on you.
Well, that is a really interesting question, because we have gone round and round in circles about this. But we figured children, so if it's a children's event, we do it at 2 o'clock because it's after lunchtime. It's kind of in the middle of the afternoon. Mums or dads or aunties, grandmas can just have a bit of a break for half an hour whilst the event's going ahead. Now, the evening ones, we've stuck it at 8 o'clock because most people have finished doing what they're doing in the evening at 8 o'clock. They're not going to bed early, or they're not going to do chats at 9 o'clock. So we figured that was kind of like the average time. We didn't want to do it at 7 because some people are either, still working, coming home, sorting kids out. So we figured 8 o'clock for adults and 2 o'clock in the afternoon for kids.
Okay, Sue, thanks. Caroline, do you have anything to add on that one? Have you guys seen anything? Have you done any insight around timings that work best?
So we've been consistently doing it at 3:30 p.m. for that family audience, but also what we've done is ensure that we curated all those videos and then re-promoted them so people can watch on their own time, because we see a bit like you were saying, Sue, you're just trying to find that time where people can have that piece of time that's relevant for them, and it's so busy at the moment. So I think part of the event and the timing is ensuring that you then can go promote and people can watch later at their convenience as well, and that's where you see a really interesting audience mix as well.
Great, thank you. The next question, we're getting quite a few questions about libraries. So I'm going to go to Maura first on this one, which is just, is there a place for libraries in this? It works differently for libraries, but can libraries do events with equal success as bookshops and other venues?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think for us, the biggest thing that we need is a really huge mailing list, and that's something that libraries have. I'm working with Crediton Library later in early June. They're running a festival, and that's definitely an area that we want to be making sure that we're in as much as possible, not least to offer some support for them, which must be such a hugely difficult time. And so, yeah, I mean, I want their mailing list, so yes, please.
All right, everyone, get in touch with Maura if you are a library. We've got some questions around smaller authors. So obviously, it was discussed before, the big names are an easy sell or an easier sell in this situation. What can we do for the lesser known authors? And is this actually an opportunity to help such authors enhance their platforms? Why don't we do CJ first on this one? Because I think that you really tried to do that with your festival, and you've probably got some thoughts here.
Yeah, it was absolutely wonderful to have free reign and just program whoever I wanted. So I was really keen to give smaller authors an opportunity, especially, you know, this is the moment that they need to be out shouting about their books and bookshops are closed. So yes, I think that you know, providing an opportunity for them to just come on. I wanted to make sure that I had established authors and new authors alike, because I found that if I programmed a sort of established author and then had an event with a smaller author, people tended to stay on. So that kind of, you know, thinking, I think did bring audiences that they might not have had. And people did mention that they encountered authors that they wouldn't have maybe picked up or you know, attended that event previously. What was the other part of the question?
Is this an opportunity to help such authors enhance their platforms?
Yeah, I think so. And I think even in terms of giving them an opportunity to do this, it maybe, I've seen some people who contributed to the festival then go off and do events on their own Instagram account or their own Facebook Live. And they've, you know, they've got that sort of following. People can then, you know, if they want to pick up on a specific question or whatever, they can go and watch their own sort of channel.
Great, thank you. There's a question I think I'm going to send to Caroline, which is, it says, as schools go back, which is still a little bit of a question mark, but let's say that schools go back. Is there an opportunity to bring them into this mix too, especially when author visits are curtailed, and that's usually such a big part of schools' marketing and promo?
Yeah, so in fact at Puffin we have a schools show that we usually do every quarter, and that is streamed into schools, and they can have that at their own access. So I think it's about, and that's called the Puffin Storymaker Show. So I think it's about what does that mean next as a phase for schools, and being able to bring those stories direct into the classroom. So I'm sure, like other publishers, will be thinking about what is the safe and relevant platform for that. But there's definitely a place there for those age ranges.
Okay, great. I'm pausing as I get sent a new, great. I've just been sent a typo, which is hilarious. There has been a flurry of virtual events. Which ones have cut through, do you think, and what's made them do that? Maura, do you have any thoughts on sort of what's made the successful virtual events really kind of stand out and cut through?
Well, these two great women we've got with us today.
Present company, obviously.
I think it's regularity, in terms of, if you think about community, if you're expecting people to, you know, choose your event over everything else that's out there. I think there is a certain brilliance about making it very, very clear about what to expect and when it's coming. And just to speak actually to the point about what do you do if you don't have big names, and I really think that that kind of like incremental building of community comes from regularity and setting out to your audience exactly what they can expect and when. So not to give Orion its own kind of haunty, but I'm gonna. We launched White Rabbit, a new music-focused imprint by Lee Braxton, right at the height of lockdown, so April. And although the events themselves are online, based on the socials website, that is, they're putting out a whole myriad amazing content from across the whole of, like, in terms of amazing writers, not just musicians, not just big names, but really, really talented, really high quality content. It goes out in a kind of a broadsheet effect every Sunday. And so we've seen an amazing growth in our community there. And that is about plugging away and it being, setting yourself like a kind of manageable target, but just every week, or a certain time every day if you can. It's that making sure that there's new and like very, very rich content for people to consume. So that's the cut through. I think certainly the people that are really experienced at events in the real world. So Damien Barr's Literary Salon has gone online, which was fantastic. But of course also How To Academy have really moved quite quickly. Guardian Live close behind them. So it is, there is a reason these people know how to curate and put events together. So I think, and that's why obviously like CJ is incredible and knows her audience and knows what people really need. So it's about that knowledge of audience and how to reach them. And those are the people that are succeeding at this point.
I think that's a really glorious and triumphant note to end on as we've hit the end of our time. I want to say one thing, which is just that if you are an events organizer and you haven't seen this already, the amazing Hannah Trevarthen at English Pen has set up a forum for organizers to swap tips and ideas. So if you haven't already, email her on hannah@englishpen.org or find her on Twitter so she can include you in this group of incredible people. It's also a great resource, obviously, for publicists who are trying to find event organizers in the UK. All that is left for me is to thank you all so much for coming and thank our panelists, CJ, Caroline, Sue, and Maura, for being with us and sharing their wisdom. You'll all be receiving an email in the next couple of days with some bullet points kindly compiled by the BMS and the PPC, plus a video of this recording so you can revisit this chat over and over and share with anyone who couldn't make it. You can expect the next event from us within a matter of weeks, and we'll announce it here soon. Also, I am putting together the program right now for July's Marketing and Publicity Conference, so please do email me with anything that you would like to see on the day, and I'll do what I can to incorporate it. Thank you all so much to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Miriam.
Thank you.
Thank you.